and part-time field staff that have joined our team this year. And a couple years ago, I guess actually maybe about 5-7 years ago, I talked with Andrea, and she was the one that told me that she used to be on staff here in Chicago, kind of opened up this world for us, that there were still all these people around here that used to be on staff with Chicago, including the Kovics. And so she introduced us, and we had a little bit of an opportunity at that point to hear a little bit of the history and kind of brief our team at that time. And then with so many new people this year, we just thought, wouldn't it be fun if we could kind of do that again, kind of get a chance to hear the timeline of what's happened here with Cru. Let me go back to that. Over the years. And so it was really crazy, though, how this night just expanded, and I think it's really the Lord that brought it together, and even just, I think it's cool because it just honors and glorifies Him, and that's what we would hope that the evening would do. So I think through Andrea agreeing to come up, which was so great, I was like, I have a crazy idea. Want to come to Chicago for this dinner? And then she did. Even persevered through all of the craziness today. And then the Kovics said that they were able to come and invited some other folks, and so yeah, we just the Schmidts you were actually our original idea too. And so yeah, anyway, we're just really excited about this night, and honestly, one of the things I'm most excited about is to piece together some of the history of Cru here in Chicago. So attempted a little bit with some slides and some pictures that were sent, and trying to piece together some stories, but I think that there's a lot more that I hope will kind of even just unfold as we hear stuff right now. So we thought we just wanted to give some form to this evening and ask a few different questions of all sort of the decades represented. So we asked 4 questions. And we'll put a couple people on the spot because you were the only people maybe here in that decade. But we asked, what was the team like that was here in Chicago, and what campuses were they working on at the time? And then we wanted to ask, what were some key events that took place while you were here? What are some of the challenges that you faced, and what did you see the Lord do? And then we also kind of asked just any fruit that you know of, sort of the legacy that you left, any stories maybe you know of people continuing to walk with the Lord or minister. So anyway, that is what we're going to try to work our way through and just see what stories come out and honor the Lord in that way. So like I said, I attempted to put together the pictures in some kind of order, and I have no idea. We'll see if they're here we go. So okay. Well, I threw a few pictures of our campuses up there too. So campuses go. Yeah. Okay. So I think that we have the 60s represented, perhaps by Marty, at least end of the 60s. So yeah, I don't know if you just want to maybe jump up, or you can share from there.
You want to show us what picture?
Oh yeah. What kind of? Yeah.
Oh my.
There's Van Steele.
Van D. Steele.
And then those are some pictures
Chuck
that
and
you sent.
Charlene.
So who are these folks?
These pictures came from bands.
Just scroll through.
That might just be there.
Is that Robert?
Yeah, Robert Nalen. He was a guy I worked with in Northern Illinois after I left.
Okay.
That might be, yeah.
Okay.
Those are the pictures. So,
I have no idea what you want to hear, so I'll just give you a little bit and answer questions or sit down. I went through staff training in 1968 in January at Arrowhead Springs. Had come out of a strong church background and was really drawn to the idea of evangelism, which was not a part of my church background. I spent 1 year at SIU as a new staff person, and interestingly enough, a new staff woman and I were down there together opening a work on a new campus as first-year staff, which presented its own set of problems. Crusade realized we needed training, so I was moved up to Chicago and she went elsewhere. And interestingly enough, they made me staff or campus director at UIC. That was the year that Steve Kovic and I lived together. And I think we were assigned there, Steve, because there were students there that wanted staff. That's my best recollection. Can you
There weren't very many.
Well, there weren't very many, and there were 4 of us on staff, Steve and myself and 2 women. just to give you a picture, this was a time of tremendous activism on campus. I went through staff training 68. In the spring of 68, Robert Kennedy was assassinated. Martin Luther King was assassinated. The Civil Rights Movement was well underway. The Vietnam War was going on. The Democratic National Convention occurred in Chicago in 1968. The Youth International Party, the Yippies, were demonstrating there, and there were riots in the city. The police were really called to task. We had the Black Panther Party. We had the Chicago 7 trial that came out of the Chicago Democratic Convention. Watergate everything was leading up to Watergate at that time. And so the campus was really in turmoil.
And they shut down the university.
Say it again?
When did they shut down the campus when we were there?
Okay. Yeah, and my wife Judy was at Kent State when the students there were killed. So we were trying to present a message along with so many other messages that were going out on campus. I remember we had Arthur Katz speak in the, what they call it, the free speech. It was an outside arena. He was a Messianic Jew who found Jesus while traveling in Europe, having worked on a merchant ship. Very articulate man. There was a large Jewish population at UIC at that time, and he really captured their attention. We brought Andre Cole to campus, and he did an evangelistic presentation. We had a musical group more than once, I think, called Hope. Turned out to be a very charismatic group. I remember being exposed to speaking in tongues before the concert the first time that they came to campus.
They were hippies too, weren't they?
Yeah, they were hippies too. Well, part of the Jesus movement.
Yeah.
The Jesus movement was going on. We spoke in classrooms. We had meetings in the afternoon at the end of class time when the students could gather before going home. At that time, it was all commuters. So anyway, that's a picture of what it was like back then. Some of the people you saw here are really the legacy that I'm very excited about. One of the first, well, Chuck Singleton and his wife Charlene. Chuck is now a pastor of a megachurch in California, and they have other kinds of ministries and parachurch organizations. Chuck was a friend of Van Steele that I got to know pretty well. Van grew up in one of the housing projects at 13th and what he called Troop, T-H-R-O-O-P.
Well, that's right here,
Yeah.
that street.
Van is a dear friend who I lost touch with for a long time, but he would go with me. I was invited to speak a couple times at high school groups, and I'd take Van with me. And I remember one time driving on the Eisenhower, and this is not intended to be pejorative at all, but it's a picture of his world. He saw a jet flying overhead, and he commented that jets could stop in midair. I mean, it was just his understanding of the world at that time was very, very limited. But after he graduated, he joined staff. There was a big emphasis on recruiting and developing a black staff to reach out to the black community and blacks on campus. So he was a part of that. He wound up, after staff, going to the military. He had what did you say? He had a second lieutenant?
Became a second lieutenant, and his last assignment was a Pentagon.
Traveled places that I've never been. And today he's an assistant pastor and just a faithful man with 3 grown children, one of whom is getting a PhD. Just an exciting thing. And I was able to find Van on the internet a couple of years ago and reconnected with him, but haven't seen him for 35 or 40 years. And my wife Judy and I are traveling to Memphis next month, and we have a date set to meet Van and his wife after all these years. So that's just one of real exciting thing. Chris Sinakis grew up in an apartment in Chicago. His father was a waiter in a Greek restaurant. Chris is a pastor in the East Coast. Tom Locke, I met he was at Wright City College, but I met him because out of a Christmas conference, a group of men who were already out of school asked if we could form a small group, and Tom knew one of those guys. Tom is a covenant pastor today in Menominee, Wisconsin. I could go on.
Joe Loziak.
Joe Loziak, thank you. Joe went to Europe. He's Polish by descent, by heritage. In fact, he was born in Poland. He went back there when Poland was still communist. He got to know the cardinal who wound up being the Pope. He was involved in a Catholic renewal movement called Oasis in Poland. He met his wife there. She was a former nun or headed toward being a nun. They are continuing a ministry in Poland to this day.
And he really started Cru in Poland. He was the first guy. And at one point when he was there, of course Rich probably knows more than I do, one of the secret police came to him and said, if you don't leave Poland, we're going to kill you.
Yeah.
And so he left at that point. But he's since gone back.
No, Steve, Ed.
Well, I don't know if there's a whole lot more to add.
Okay.
Rich Rivora, he was a UIC guy. He's going to talk too, but he was in Poland for 16 years and has had a fabulous career.
I would say that even my relationship with Steve is a tremendous legacy. Steve came out of a fraternity, young Christian. I had been in the church and in the faith for years. We complemented each other, I think, in tremendous ways. We lived together for 1 year. Steve went on to NIU. I stayed at Circle. But we've gone to church together. We've played together. We've
Argued together.
Talked
theology.
We've Steve and I worked in my business together for what, almost 10 years?
Almost 10 years.
Okay, so anyway, very, very positive recollections of time there.
Yeah.
Questions? Anything you guys want to?
I want to hear. Oh, sorry. Just like how were you thinking about the city? Were you thinking about UIC in particular, Circle campus in particular, like other schools, like how did that look?
Well, Marty, remember we used to go, where was it?
We worked the city colleges at the time. It was Harold Washington College on the lake, Malcolm X College, Wright Junior College.
Triton?
Yeah.
Is there Triton?
Yeah.
Okay, so
I'm an extrovert, so I got to get up and say something. Well, instead of Marty, no. There's another fella. There were these guys. Where did Loziak? Well, it's funny. Loziak was.
they came from a little Baptist church in Cicero or Berwyn.
Joe Loziak was the campus student leader at UIC, and after a few years, we discovered that he was not enrolled. But he was the student leader on campus. He's a fanatic. You would love this guy. He's absolutely insane, and he just totally sold out to the Lord. He's kind of crazy, but he's a good guy. And then he had several other friends. One of them, Joe Pedraza.
Joe Pedraza.
A guy named Joe Pedraza. He was on staff for a while. He went through a terrible few years in his life. Was kind of destroyed almost. He's in China. He's been in China for 5 years or something like that. He came out of this little Baptist church too. He's on fire. I don't know what he's doing in China, but I'm sure he speaks Chinese. He's over there on his own. I don't think he's a part of any group.
Well, I can add to that. Joe got medical training. He's a medical doctor, and he's there practicing medicine, but his purpose in being there is evangelism.
Yeah. And
he's kind of, and in ways that can't be made public, in small groups and on the quiet. And he's been there, I think, longer than 5 years.
Yeah.
He's probably closer to 10.
And knowing him, I don't think it's quiet.
Well,
Yeah.
you have to be sensitive to the situation, is
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say.
But he's a good guy.
So,
And then after I left UIC, I was just there 1 year. Then I went to Northern Illinois, and I was out there for about 6 years, and enjoyed it. Had a good time. don't have a whole lot more to add than that. And then I eventually went to Agape training and went to Europe, lived in Austria for almost 6 years and learned Serbian. I am Serbian. And I learned Serbian, traveled all over Yugoslavia, and then I went to Fuller Seminary, then I came back to Chicago, still on staff, and joined in with some Christian businessmen because I was going to go in this import-export business to Croatia and eventually to Serbia, but it just didn't work out. The business failed, and so by that time I married Susie, and so then I got a job with Marty. Worked with him for 10 years, and then been doing some other things, but still in sales. And I like to think of myself as a fanatic for Jesus, cleverly disguised as a salesman. Where do we go next, Rich or Susie? Yeah, Rich.
Go ahead.
My name is Rich. My background is Polish, which we'll connect later. And, I was a student at U of I, Chicago Circle, between 1970 and 1976. And it was in 1972 that Steve Kovic, the year he was there, and the campus director at the time was Conrad Cook. The two of them helped lead me into faith in Christ. It was October 1972. And that began my involvement with Campus Crusade as a student. So Conrad was campus director, his wife Barb was with him. There were a couple of other campus directors during that time I was there. The last one I remember, Rich Roloff, Rich and Mary Roloff, he was campus director, and neat guy. And when I graduated in May, June 1976, there were several of us students who came on staff that summer. So besides me, there was, I have to write down to make sure I remember, there was Chuck Helt, he came on staff, Steve Rashke. Steve Rashke came from another campus and was at Circle for a year or so. So he graduated out of Circle, came on staff. Rich McKeno came on staff. So yeah, there were several of us from that year. Chuck Helton ended up in computer systems, now called digital strategies, but computer systems back there. He met his wife on staff. They were on staff for like 14 years or so. Left. They live now in Hoffman Estates. He works, and they're actively involved with Willow Creek Community Church, lead small groups and all that. Steve Rashke came on staff. He was actually in Madison, Wisconsin with me for a while. Later he went to seminary, became a pastor in the EV Free Church, assistant pastor in Iowa. Rich McKeno went overseas to Nigeria with the Agape movement. That was kind of a vocational staff. He was there for quite a few years. Met his wife there, American. She was a nurse. Came back, came off staff, taught mathematics in the public school system in the south suburbs. Was involved with the Here's Life Intercity Agape Center for a little bit. And they're in Ohio somewhere doing something. So Larry and Ann Urban were two students who came out of the ministry. They didn't come on staff, but they got involved with Salvation Army here locally in Chicago. So there was another student, he remembers his Heido, but Mike Avramovich was at North Park College, now North Park University, and he would come to the weekly meetings that the staff team at that time lived in Oak Park. But we had weekly meetings on Friday called CathGive, which stood for Christians Also Thank God It's Friday. So Mike remembers meeting me at CathGive, but Mike ended up going into law, practicing law, still practices law, has done things with Christian Legal Society, human rights for Christians overseas, various things like that. So practicing law. And then, of course, Joe Losiak. I remember Joe a little bit. And our paths kind of crossed a little bit in the late 1970s in Poland. Because when I came on staff, Bill Bright talked about going to the world, the world vision for the Great Commission, and that's what motivated me. So I wanted to go overseas as soon as I could. So back then the only way to do it was to go through the Agape movement. So I went through Agape training in the fall of 1976, and I was initially going to go to Soviet Union with another guy, Ned Keller, and they gave out assignments, and Ned ended up going to Nigeria with Rich Makino, and I was put on hold, and they figured I needed some more campus ministry training, so that's how I ended up at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And when I got to Madison, I still tried to go overseas right away, so I went on a summer project, so that was 1977, and that's when I went to Poland. Saw what God was doing there, determined to return long-term, which I did the following year. I was there for one academic year with a small team. And then along the way, my relationship with my future wife developed. We got married in October '79. We're in the States for a year, went through training, support, and then September 1st, 1980, we returned to Poland. That was the day after the Solidarity Trade Union came into being. Started a whole new chapter in Poland. So anyway, we and others were there. Ruthie and I were there for 16 years in Poland, helping to build a student movement from the ground up. Of course, Joe was the one who made the connections and launched the crusade ministry in Poland.
Pretty cool. All right. So Rich's and my time at UIC crisscrossed. I was there from '74 and left in '77. And so we saw a lot of people come on staff during that time. It was pretty exciting. One person who we also saw come on staff was one of the first African-American gals who came on staff, Evelyn. She only was able to stay on staff for about 1.5 years, and she had to leave because of support, lack of support, which was really kind of sad. Another interesting person who came on staff in the amazing way that God works was one of the guys who lived with our staff guys. And so we all lived in Oak Park, like Rich said. All of us staff girls, 5 of us lived in one apartment. Next door were the guys, and then Mary and Rich Roloff lived in an apartment over on Taylor. So we're all pretty close to each other. We all commuted in the morning, 7:30. Whoever was driving that day picked you up, and you had to be ready. And if you were not ready, if your makeup was not on top, you were in the car and you had to go. First appointment started at 8, and then your last appointment finished at 3, because we tried to get out of there before rush hour got too backed up. Because if you got stuck in rush hour, it could be an hour before you got home, and we did not want that, because you go home, you crash for a while, relax, do whatever you wanted to do for fun, have dinner, and then we would be on the phones for 2 or 3 hours every night. Those of you who work on commuter campuses maybe know about this, but we would be on the phones from like 7:30 till 10:30, calling kids for appointments, working with disciples, just all kinds of stuff. So I kind of felt like it was a half phone ministry and a half person-to-person when you were on campus, but a lot of our work was done on the phones. The one other person, though, who came on staff that I thought was kind of a unique story is a guy named Vance Nordman, and he is still on staff working with the Jesus Film. But Vance lived next door to the girls' staff, and with some of our guys' staff, and Stan Wong. Remember Stan? And Stan, did he come on staff? Okay, and Stan Wong. So Stan was a IIT engineer, and he was Chinese background, and he was just heart of gold guy. I mean, just put the rest of us to shame. And so Stan did come on staff, that's right, and he then married, and he's currently, I think, in Oregon. And Stan, after he left staff, he continued to be very involved in his church. He's gone on several mission trips overseas with his church. He's just a great guy.
And he goes to the Middle East, that Middle East Campus Crusade thing where they pass out materials.
Yeah. Flyer. What's it
Yeah.
called?
The port
Pork
project.
Yeah,
Port
he's done
project.
that
He helps
twice,
with
he
that.
loves it.
Right, right. And then Vance Nordman, he was just a riot. He was just an easygoing California boy, you know, and he was really good for the rest of us because he'd just make us slow down and relax and just have a good time with life. And one night he called me and he said, listen, I need some help. Would you help me fill out this grad school application? Because he wanted to go to grad school. I said, oh, sure, you know, so I went over there later. And he's sitting there and he's writing out this essay about why he wants to go to grad school and what his ultimate goals are with grad school. What a scream. Everything he was writing had to do with, you know, kind of ultimately wanting his life to make an impact for Christ. And I kept, finally at the end of the night, I said, you know what, man, I'll come over and help you tomorrow night. But I said, I think that's going to be about it because you kind of have it written out here, but I'll do any editing you want, but we need to talk seriously tomorrow night about why you're really going to grad school. So the next night when I went over there, he pulls out all of his stuff, and I said, okay, now why are you going to go to grad school? What is it you want to get out of grad school? What's it going to get you, you know, to accomplish your long-term goals of glorifying God in everything you do? And he just sat there and he was trying to write it out. Finally, I closed up his file folder. That was the day of hard copy file folders. And I said, okay, when you're ready to fill out your application for Campus Crusade for Christ staff, I will help you. But this is going nowhere. So sure enough, a couple months later, he called me up and he said, okay, let's fill it out. He filled it out, he came on staff, married a gal on staff, and they've been working with the Jesus Film for I don't know how many years. So it's just kind of crazy and exciting to see all the unique ways that God calls us. And you know, the different ones of you coming from all these different campuses, it's so exciting for me to see this. When Rich and I were working with the crew here, Rich was a student, I was on staff, we really focused mostly on UIC in those days, and then we would travel 1 or 2 days a week, just 2 staff, to Wright State and to Triton, I think. Did we go anywhere else? Do you remember? I think it was just those schools. And it was just a couple staff. The focus was mostly UIC. And I don't know if you happen to notice, I mean, staff life was so different back then. But UIC used to have this huge kind of amphitheater in the center of campus, and that's why they called it Circle Campus. Well, those are the days that Marty and Steve were talking about. We would literally, Steve Rashke, students would stand in the middle, and the kids, the students would be doing their homework, or sitting with their boyfriends or girlfriends around this huge amphitheater. And Rashke would just stand there and he'd start preaching the gospel. I mean, this is the old days.
One more.
There's a couple.
There we go. There we go. Stand right in the middle. It would, the sound dynamics would carry all the way up. And I mean, if we had a free hour and nobody had an appointment, we'd go out there, and Rich Roloff did the same thing. Different ones would just take turns. We did a lot of cold evangelism with the kids who would be sitting in this thing.
It was really ugly, I thought.
Oh. And UIC had so much cement. We used to call it Cement City. That's what we nicknamed it. And Steve and I were just driving by the other day, and I'm looking at it in shock. I haven't been on this campus in years. There is so much green space now compared to what it used to be. I know, and all of you are laughing. But you guys, it was so bad before. And it is, this green space they've got now is so nice. I don't know what they did with all the cement, but I'm glad it's gone. So it was really a tough place to work. You walked into the, I don't know what they call it now, the room where all the kids would eat lunch. There would be a table of the Greek students, very segregated. The table of the African American students, a table of
Any language group in
any
the world.
Polish students,
Yeah.
right. And so if we were doing cold evangelism, I mean, sometimes you would walk into a group and ask someone if they'd be willing to take the survey, you know, and half the kids at the table who were their best buddies and connected well in their neighborhoods, they're all kind of taking the survey with you. So it was a real unique way to kind of develop a ministry. But I don't know how God blessed it, but he just did, because we didn't know what we were doing. I mean, Amy Von Glahn was on staff with us. She was from small town farm, Iowa. You know, I was from the Chicago suburbs, went to U of I. None of us were from the city. We didn't know what we were doing, and it's like, even getting around the city. You know, that's why we all commuted together and we came we were afraid to get lost if we didn't. So we learned a lot. It was just amazing to see how God worked and how He blessed and how we would just, we tried everything back in the old days and we didn't, and God blessed it in spite of us. One of the most unique situations I ever had on staff, and I was on staff about 15 years, and it was only here at this campus that I experienced this, was I worked with a gal who received Christ with me and began growing in her faith, and she had indwelling evil spirits. And do you remember Norma, Rich, at all? Anyway, I don't want to say her last name. She was heart of gold in my discipleship group, and I ended up taking her to one of the top demonologists in the city, who at that time was a professor at Moody Bible Institute, and he basically worked with her with several situations that we call exorcisms. First time this happened, he came out of teaching. He had just finished a class with these students at Moody, came into the office, she and I were waiting, we introduced each other, we talked maybe 20 minutes, and then he said, you know, he set up the whole situation. He was an amazing guy, Dr. Dixon. And he basically said, okay, Norma, if you're comfortable with this and if I have your permission, I would like to try and begin working with what you're struggling with. So you guys, I'm literally sitting in the chair right here. Norma is right here, and he is right here, and I'm like, what are you going to do? I didn't sign up for this. I can share 4 spiritual laws, but you know what? Exorcism, I don't know about. But the kind of kids you're working with, you know, you're working with kids who are coming out of rough backgrounds. She was coming out of struggling with drugs. You're working with kids who have been exposed to a more difficult life than those of us who came from the suburbs or farm town backgrounds. It just opened my eyes to some of
Tell them what
the
happened.
wounded people.
Yeah, describe it a little bit.
Why?
You made me heard of anything like that.
Okay,
You can make it brief.
all right, I'll make it brief. After this, I'll sit down. So, Dr. Dixon would, well, I don't remember everything, but first of all, he opened the scriptures, and he taught us, both of us. Little did I know that he was training me to take over when he was done. I had no clue he had that in the back of his mind. So he's taking us through scriptures, all related to the power of spirits versus the power of God, related to Satan, and it was kind of a little educational, it was an educational day. We were there 2 hours the first time. And at the end of him kind of instructing us so that Norma knew clearly that he who was in, you know, Christ is stronger than he who is in the world. And then he proceeded with her permission to address the first demon. And I don't know, I didn't know anything about this. There are levels of demons people who struggle with indwelt demons have, or indwelling spirits. There are levels, hierarchical levels in them. So when he first asked the demon to show himself, it was a low-level demon that came up. And when he first asked for this, Norma, her voice changed, her eyes changed, her body, she clutched her stomach, and she said, I will not talk to you. And then it was just like, I'm just sitting there next to her like you are, Melissa. I am like, oh my gosh, where is this coming from? This is like TV. And then he proceeded to talk to this demon. He wanted to find out what its name was and who was in charge of him. And then he proceeded to cast that demon out. And then he said, I want to talk to the next guy's name. I forget the names of them. The names of the demons were things like, they said, finally the top person was called the One. The One. That was his name. So after 3 meetings with this professor, he finally had an opportunity to address the One and cast the One out. And at that time, Norma's whole body went into convulsions. They would try to cause pain in her stomach, and he could stop. The professor was able to command them in the name of Jesus Christ and the blood, his shed blood on the hill of Calvary, to stop causing her pain. And her hands, you know, she wasn't really with us because the spirits were speaking through her. Her hands would drop from her stomach. And he would say to Norma, Norma, is there still pain in your stomach? And she would come to and she would say, no, I'm okay now. And then he would go back and work with the demons again. And the way we first found out there were demons is that she would be on the L train platform waiting to go home, and then suddenly she'd be flat out prone, screaming and kicking. And the other students, some of her friends who were going home with her, they didn't know what to do, they didn't know what was causing it. And finally she would just totally go limp, and they were with her the whole time, and then she would go home. Well, one time it happened in the student cafeteria where all the segregated tables were. And people ran to go get me because I don't know why, but really thanks a lot. And so I saw the end of this fit, and I didn't know anything about the reality of this realm. I mean, honestly, we learn about it. We read the scriptures. We're taught about it, but to me it was purely cognitive. And when I saw this, I thought, oh, this is way beyond me. And so Rich Wolof helped me, and we made some phone calls and got in touch with this man who said he would see us, and that's how it all started. But that's how it started. These demons would attack her in public, and the professor said the reason they attacked her in public is they wanted to humiliate her and embarrass her, make her look foolish in front of other people and her friends publicly, to stop her witness, basically. Yeah, it was just amazing. I learned so much. I mean, I learned so much from being on staff at UIC that I never would have dreamed, And it's always stayed with me because the reality of what you're doing is right there. You know, you're fighting a battle. It's Satan versus God, and you guys are right in the middle, and you're taking a stand for God. And there are a lot of ways you can do that. You can glorify God with your life in many, many ways. But for right now, for this season, God has you working with students on all these different campuses to challenge their belief system, to connect them with the living, loving God who is all-powerful and who can give them a new life. So that's what I learned at UIC. I will never forget it. I was never so glad to leave there. They transferred me to California. I was like, yes! But anyway, so you know, there were a lot of enlightening things, there were a lot of scary things, but the best thing was that God just chose to grow me so much by being on staff with UIC and meeting these kids who were so different than I was and just stretching me like crazy in new areas. So, is there anybody else here who's visiting? Yeah. Old staff? There's another couple,
Andrea's
right?
next.
Andrea?
Next,
All right. And there's another couple.
They
too, right?
came,
After me.
Show your
go back to the one around the table.
Jeff Morris.
Yeah, Gorski. One more, yeah, right there. This was our staff team in September or October of 1978. But in February 1978, when I arrived, go forward to the three, right here on the left. This is your new staff, Andrea Baczynski. Wow. Dick Gorski, single guy, and Debbie Palucki, our senior leader. A month after I arrived, our director and his wife left staff while we were on spring break. We came back and the rumor was that we were all going to be split up and sent to different campuses. So I was going to go to Southern, and Dick was going to go to Western, and Debbie was going to go to Eastern. And we were praying like crazy.
You guys must have been real troublemakers.
But I don't know if you've ever been in that place where you go, it's just us. And what are we going to do? And what does the Lord want us to do? And we started studying Philippians. It was when Warren Wiersbe's book, Be Joyful, it was his first book in the B series, came out. And we were studying Philippians 1. And a verse that says, Paul says, my chains have served to advance the gospel. And I can remember us in a living room, we were actually laying on the floor, looking at the word, sitting cross-legged, going, if Paul's chains could serve to advance the gospel, what could the obstacles we face here become? What could happen? And we were sitting there. I came from Penn State, which is a big residential school. Dick actually came from a commuter school up in Milwaukee, so he had seen a movement at a commuter campus. And Debbie was from Berwyn and went to Northern Illinois, so she's urban in her outlook. And we just sat there and said, you can't get time with students. People don't answer the phone. They don't hang around. It's like having a ministry in a supermarket. We were at UIC, the circle, the cement jungle. I love that because that's what it felt like. Like, this is a campus? Wow, different experience. But in that little Bible study that afternoon, God took all of these obstacles. We just made a list of everything that we felt like was standing in our way, that just couldn't break through, and go, how could God transform these? And in the conversation, what began to happen was, there were a couple of girls one girl who was involved from Evanston, SB, Esperanza Flores. And she had just led her sister to Christ. And we were watching the difference, what was happening in her family. Her mom and her dad were starting to listen to the gospel. And we go, okay, these kids may not hang around the student center, or we might not have this traditional movement, but whatever influence is happening on the campus will translate into people being reached in families, in neighborhoods. These will be people who will be part of local churches, and that in a sense it changed our perspective on what you would experience at UIC. Didn't have to look the way it had looked in different places, but it was going to have an incredible effect, an incredible long-term effect for the city. And it was kind of the birth of this a vision for our little team who did not know if they would survive. Literally, we were talking earlier, UIC at that point was on quarters, and we were not finished until almost the end of June, which, it was a long year, that's all I had to say. And so we were waiting to hear whether or not we got a director. We found out in May that it would be Jeff Morris. And if we go back to the first picture, sorry, one more, yeah. Jeff and Candy came to be the director, and he just is one of the most warm, fun-loving persons that you would ever meet. Like when they came, it felt like it brought life to the team. They had their first child, Luke, who was kind of our, I don't know, just adopted family. That's me on the left, Dick and Debbie. We had a lot of fun. One of the prime ways that we actually reached out to people were through social events. And let me change the order of that. What was going on in 1978 on UIC? Pro-Shaw, anti-Shaw. Do you remember the Shaw of Iran when he was deposed? That was going on. So when you walked into Student Center, there were like 700 or 800 Iranian students there. And on any given day, it could be WGN or WLS, they were there with the camera trucks because there was something happening. There was some demonstration. When you walked in these cafeterias, literally what Susie described, every table was a people group. And no matter where you went, you would hear a different language. And it kind of became, looking at it like, this is like a microcosm of the world right here. You could reach it from here, is what it felt like. And to begin to move among the tables and pray for what God might do in each of these tables. And is there a person, we didn't call it that at the time, but it was kind of, who is the person of peace that's going to be the entry? And eventually, my action group was 2 Filipino girls and a Caucasian from a strong Christian family background. they had a group, she had a group of Japanese students. The other one had a group of Korean student women. I was reaching out to a Thai woman, 3 Polish women, and a bunch of others. But it was just like the world was right at your fingertips every time you sat down to eat. Can we, okay, this is one of the outstanding events while I was there. We had Andre Cole, and we did everything we could. We had the best banners, like across part of the circle, like it would be up against these cement overhangs. They were massive banners. And posters. We postered that place until that was all you could see. And we come in the next day, and not a one of them is there. Not one. So you thought, okay, we'll do more posters. Blanket the campus. We come in the next day, nada. So you thought, well, we'll make some sandwich boards. You can't. I don't think people will assault us. You know what I mean? So this is me, and this is Debbie, my trainer. And we walked around in those things. They were the half-mast, Laurel and Hardy, and I mean, the comments were rich. But on the day when Andre Cole showed up to do the show, we were in the 2nd floor, the big ballroom in the student center that I think sat 700 people. They closed the doors at 1,000.
Wow.
And I mean, to this day, give me goosebumps to think about it, because we just didn't even know if anybody would show up. And we were standing on the 2nd floor where the escalators go up to the ballroom. And we started to watch this stream of people and kind of wonder where they're going. And they went straight up. And it was a breakthrough kind of time, because we had follow-up to do, and there were people who came to Christ, and it was kind of the talk of the campus. The campus helped fund it, actually. It was an amazing thing, and I'll never forget it. Like the stuff that we were coming up against on the way, and then what God did during that time was pretty phenomenal. Okay, this couple right here, that's Renee Novak. She was the first person I led to Christ at UIC. And we were just sitting across the table from each other in a cafeteria, and she was working on calculus. And I was a chem major, so I could at least recognize it. And we started a conversation. And it was one of those remarkable conversations that you could not believe when you're in the middle of it. Because I just looked at her and said, well, have you ever thought about spiritual things? I think I'm fighting for an opener, right? And she goes, all the time. All the time. I wonder, what is God like? And what would it be like to know him? And she looks at me and she goes, why do you ask? And praise the Lord, he gives you something. I don't know where all this came from, but I said, well, I had an experience several years ago that I would love to tell you about. And I started to tell my testimony and wove the 4 spiritual laws into it. And was telling her about John 3:16, and that Jesus came to bring life and to give us abundant life that would be full and meaningful. And she looks at me and she goes, but why don't we have it? Well, we go through and we get to, we're separated from God. And she goes, well, this is a problem. It is a problem, and God knows that. It is a problem. When we get to at the end of Law 3, and I said, Jesus is the only way. She goes, how? Just tell me how. I kid you not. And to that point, I didn't even have a 4 laws out. We weren't walking through it. I was telling her my story. And at that point, I pulled it out and actually just pulled the circles out.